In today's episode of the show, we're joined by Danny Klein, who's the editor of FSR Magazine, amongst other titles. He talks a little bit about it because the week that we did the interview, he had just been promoted. He and I talk a ton about the state of the industry, what's working, what's not working, the state of bankruptcies in the world today, and quite frankly, just a huge range of different concepts and what he sees from the data. If you don't know me, my name is Jeremy Julian. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer of Custom Business Solutions. We sell the North Star point of sale product. I've spent over 30 years in the restaurant industry, specifically in the restaurant tech industry. And so I've got lots of different areas of expertise to share. And I'd love to have you join us for the whole episode. Welcome back to the Restaurant Technology Guys podcast. I thank everyone out there for joining us. For those that are on video, you'll probably recognize the face, and I promise you'll remember the name. Danny, why don't you introduce yourself to our audience, tell everybody a little bit about what you get to do for a living, and then we can jump into the topic.
Sure. So my name is Danny Klein. I just got a title change to see if I can get this correct. I am now the VP editorial director at WTWH Media's FRH Properties. Okay, I know that was I'm still trying to figure out how to write it, but essentially it means I'm still in charge or leading the content on QSR and FSR Magazine, which I imagine is where anyone who's listening to this has seen me before. But now I also have some content oversight of our other food publications, which are C-Store Decisions, Club and Resort, and PMQ Pizza Magazine. So got a lot of things going on these days that just happened a week and a half ago. So still trying to figure out what is going on, but that is the story.
And like I said, I get the privilege, or maybe privilege, I don't know. I do read a lot of what you write, and so it's always fun to kind of get into the weeds. And so now that I get to sit and ask questions, I don't get to just post comments on LinkedIn when you post those articles. Talk to me, Danny, a little bit, just kind of macro trends that you're hearing when you're hearing out in the industry. I know you get a chance to talk to some of the biggest brands in the country. You get to dine at some of the smaller brands local to home. Talk to me about some of the biggest challenges that you're hearing and seeing them face today, so we can start to dig into how they're trying to solve.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm sure you know this. Anyone who lives within the restaurant industry, covers it, works in it. There is always some situation of crisis. So what I would say, it's a very unforgiving landscape, also very rewarding. There's a lot of opportunity to be had, but at the same time, as you've seen the last couple weeks and months, particularly the last month, there's been just a rash of bankruptcies. I think we're up to 21, maybe 22 on the year. And I don't think that number is going to get smaller, obviously, as we get toward the end of the year, because there is this sense right now of the costs of what everything costs to do business has just gone up. The labor, nothing new there. Some of the technology, I think, of how you're trying to piece these things together, you would say individually, some of those pieces have gotten more affordable, but you're trying to unify a lot of different solutions at this stage of the tech stack journey. And then, of course, things like real estate and sites and costs and the timelines are all longer than they were. And so there's just a lot of situations on the traffic side that some brands look down that pipe, and the access to capital and what it costs to get capital now. Those two things have put up a roadblock that not everyone can get over. And so I think the main thing that we talk about now, or at least in the interviews that I have and the stories that I write, everything is about value. But the value topic is such a nuanced one that you really have to figure out exactly what that means to the people who come to eat there. I was writing a story this morning about value perceptions, and interestingly, the Cheesecake Factory, in terms of reasons that people weren't going to dine there, being too expensive was number one for them. Yet from value perception, they were third overall on the entire list. While there were people who were saying things along the lines of, I can't go there as much as I did last year because of the price, they also thought it was a good value. And you think about, okay, what does that mean? And I think that's the story of the restaurant industry right now, because what it means is that people are going to the Cheesecake Factory less often, especially those people who are not frequent customers. And you hear this all across restaurants, especially in casual dining and full service, is that they're not doing as well with that infrequent guest. But when they do come, they're still spending the same amount of money, and they're viewing what the Cheesecake Factory does to be a good value. So for a brand like them, you hear this at First Watch as well, just hold the fort on what happens and get to that part on the other side where people are a little bit more open with their spending versus reacting really quickly right now. But trying to figure out what it means to be a good value is so far beyond the price. However, there are some brands, Papa John's comes to mind, that realized that they did have to actually play more in the value side of their price on the compelling value side. And so you see that too. So that I think is where we're at. Very
Yeah, no, and
complicated.
it's
Yeah.
tough. I mean, the I've been doing this for close to 30 years, and I don't know that I've seen any time in my career that there's been this many bankruptcies. And, as you said, both the inflationary stuff, the cost of capital going up. We happen to do business with Cheesecake, and it's funny that you bring that brand up because they've always had that. They've always had that, big portion sizes. It's just a step more expensive than kind of your standard casual dining. They, call it upscale casual dining. It's not quite to fine dining. And I think your frequent guests, it's fine, but the ones that are infrequent, it's trying to figure out. Danny, you talked about opportunities. You said that there is opportunities that it also is creating. Talk to me a little bit about some, I guess some stories that you might have of opportunities. Where are people doing well? Where are things growing? Is it on that value side? Is it on the experiential side? Talk to me a little bit more about what you guys are
Yeah.
seeing statistics and in the stories that you're.
So here's one of the upsides of what we might call like a zero sum environment, which is how I would characterize where we're at now. There's no middle currently. There is an
Yes,
experiential, yeah, I pronounce that. And
it's been a
yeah,
long
and
week.
there's a value transactional. So the
Hmm.
opportunity lies in figuring out how to define that best. So I think casual dining, you see that we're talking bankruptcies all over the place in that sector at the moment. But
Hmm.
again, to the Cheesecake Factory's point, and others, and Chili's is a interesting case here with what they've been able to do recently with their marketing. But you have a pretty unique chance right now to really hone into that experience because you can very much clarify how you're different than somebody else in quick service or whatever brand you want to go measure it against. Because the one thing that is not that different is the price. The price
Yep.
gaps between fast casual and QSR right now are almost non existent. If you go to Kava, I did this recently, you get double meat. It's like
Hmm.
$14, okay, which is not obviously a small amount you had to drink, but that's not that much different than like a combo meal on the regular side of McDonald's. That's probably about
Yep.
$10. And naturally, they have the $5 because they're trying to court back that customer that's pulled their visits. But that point being, your opportunity is pretty clear if you can go be that version of yourself in a very compelling way and do a good job of telling the story. We talk about Chili's again here. They really went right at McDonald's with this burger, the Big Smasher, which is essentially very similar, and talking about how the price point at 10.99 on the 3 for me, here's how much you get, plus you get a server, plus you get the experience at Chili's, so on and so forth. And they're doing great right now. And they went right to TikTok and they went on social. And so they had an opportunity to have that infrequent guest that we're talking about come in there and go, wow, this is actually a better value than I thought it was, considering how I felt when I left X brand the other day. And that's where that gap that closed within the price tiers has allowed, I think, both sides of that equation to be successful if you don't get stuck in the middle. And that's a
Yep.
hard, as Scott Murphy said the other day at our conference from Inspire Brands, the restaurant industry is very simple, but simple is very hard.
Yeah, I've heard that
Yeah.
saying before, and former BJ CEO used to talk about barbell strategy. I don't know if
Right.
if you yeah, I've seen a couple articles that have been out in the press recently about the barbell strategy where you've got some items on the low end of the price scale for casual dining, you've got some high end items, and again, even for myself, the 3 for me, Chili's was not in my frequency with a family of 6, like, going out to eat with a family of 6 is expensive, regardless of where you go, whether I'm going to McDonald's and I'm spending $5 or I'm going to, Cheesecake Factory and spending $20 a person, it doesn't matter, it's expensive, but quite frankly, we have now refrequented Chili's more often, partially because the service has been good. They implemented some technology to help make the service better than it was, 7, 8 years ago. Number one. And number two, there is value if you're looking to get in. I can get into there for less expensive oftentimes than my family might go to Chipotle. As crazy as that sounds, I can spend less money at Chili's than I can at Chipotle, save maybe
Yeah,
the tip.
exactly.
So, Well, and
That's
it's
the
so
point.
crazy
Yeah.
to me because that's never been the case in my career so far. I've never had such a price parity. So what are people doing to differentiate themselves to be able to get that guest in? Because every single casual dining brand I work with talks about traffic being their biggest opportunity to increase that guest, coming in the door. And so how are people solving for that? Because it's not an easy fix.
Yeah. So a lot of different layers. I think, of course, the barbell strategy, to your point, this has been around forever in QSR in particular. Wendy's has been a master of this for so long, where you have this entry point on the four for four, or whatever it might be. But then when they get in there, you've got this ability to say, okay, the $5 biggie bag, here's what you get that's more. Oh, or you want the recent LTO, here's something that's really interesting. It's $8. It's work their way up the ladder to get them to come back more often, but then also have that entry point to satisfy that quote unquote value seeker. And this is something that Applebee's does very well. I think in casual
Mhm.
dining, you see a lot of these all you can eat abundance type meals recently. And Buffalo Wild
Yeah.
Wings had a lot of success with theirs at the $20 price point. And it wasn't so based in the couponing or discounting strategy, but more in the look at this experience of how much you could get versus what you're able to go get in counter service. So I think you're seeing that now. You're seeing a lot of deals through the app. McDonald's app is basically its dollar menu at this point, and that's become a very common just way. But what I will say to the broader point though, so Chick-fil-A is a great example of this, and I think they're a great example of most things on the
Yes.
success spectrum. They've gotten more expensive in the last 3 or 4 years, no question about that. To your kind of family point, when I go to eat there now with my family, it's probably, 30 to $40 ish, which,
Mm,
but are people really pushing back on it? No. And
not
then I think the reason for that is just that I think their overall experience, the service, the ambiance, consistency, and the quality leaves you feeling as though it was worth what you paid for. And that is the repeat strategy solution, in my opinion, at this point. That execution and that operational excellence, I don't think you can get away with just having cheap food now. Just
Yeah.
doesn't
Well,
work.
you certainly need to deliver an experience, even if it's not, I mean, and I say you've got to deliver an experience and you said it earlier, Danny. I love there are people that go for experiences and there are people that go for satiation. And each end of that is different. I need to eat. I'm driving home from soccer practice. I need to get food into my kids because they need to get a bath or they need to get a shower before they get to bed. And those are part of the the strategy that you got to figure out how to deal with. And then you've got the other side of it where you're going out on a Friday night, you need drinks, you need, you're wanting to create that experience. So it's funny that you bring that up because I've talked about that a lot is depending upon how your guests are and how they want to interact with your brand, you've got to be able to meet them in all of those different places if you want to stay
Yeah, I
relevant.
think the food as fuel mantra of QSR, which was very much the case when I started here roughly a decade ago, way less the case now. I think you
Yes.
still, to a degree, need to have that option if you're a Taco Bell. But most people now, younger consumers in particular, don't look at going to the drive-through for that reason. There's a beyond the margin part of why dollar menus don't work anymore. It's just also
Yeah.
not the type of strategy that appeals to the way that the consumer has changed their habits of purchasing. The drive-through is a great example of everything that happens in QSR. We just finished our annual report on this, and the trend is basically that once upon a time, and this has been a 4-year cycle that I've seen this begin to show. Speed was the only thing that anyone cared about. It was like, okay, you
Hmm.
get faster, you get more transactions. The customer has this almost handshake idea with the restaurant that they're going to give you a small amount of food so they can go quickly for a low amount of price. And whatever happens after that, this just is what it is. But what's changed in the last 4 years is that accuracy has become the unlock of what speed perception actually is. And so what we see
Absolutely.
now is that the more accurate brands are actually perceived faster than the faster brands by time of clock from in and out. And the reason for that, I think, is not complicated. I think if you look at like all of us and how we buy things and we go to Amazon and we order something and you get the email confirmation a second later, and then you're just used to waiting a little bit And I think that's how
Mhm.
food has become now. I want to see it on the screen. I want to order. I don't want to scream into a scratchy box and no one could understand me. I want my order taken really quickly, and then I might chill on my phone in the drive-through line for 7, 8 minutes. But if the food is in the bag, it's accurate, it's good, and it was delivered with customer experience, I'm gonna drive away thinking that was fast. We see it every single year. Chick-fil-A is always the last brand by total time in our study for two reasons, that being one of them, and the other being the fact that they're just really busy. But then we
Yes.
do the survey part, and their perception is they're always the fastest. And the reason is that A, they give you accuracy, they're at the top. They're at the top of the customer experience. And then they're also fastest at individual cars, how fast they move those. So that's what people want right now, is like that immediate gratification of accuracy, and then
Mhm.
the experience follows.
Well, and I had a guest on before, and it's like when you know what to expect, it's fine. You talked about the Amazon, when you go to a theme park, when we see the line moving, regardless of how long it takes
Right.
you in line, if you're moving, you feel like you're doing something. But when you're standing in line and you haven't moved in 10 minutes, it starts to get you, there's something about the human psyche where you're like, well, what's going on? How do I go fix this? And I think Chick-fil-A does such a magical job of keeping things moving. In and out's another example that's just fantastic
Yeah, and
in that
another
regard.
example to what we've been talking about is you look at who's being successful now without doing something crazy. Texas Roadhouse, and every single call that I've sat on there is through the pandemic, labor crises, the Great Recession. They're
Yep.
always doing better, and they don't really change several things about themselves. One being they don't take a lot of price. They price to cover the inflation. They keep giving people the same amount of food. And they're very manager focused in how their dining room was designed, which was one of the very early Kent Taylor things, was just to have the manager and the sight lines be a part of how the store is run by an operating partner who takes in the profits. But point being that good food, really good service, line dancing, fun, you get a abundance on the plate, doesn't cost a ton of money. They don't really worry about things like how they're going to change their staffing model. They just keep staffing to the full extent. And then you
Mhm.
wonder why they keep having positive traffic. And so
Yeah.
it's one of those things, again, like I said earlier, hard to execute that, but their playbook just does not change. They don't react to the macro things. And, there, I think if you're looking at an example of someone in that sit down space who you might want to model after, I would begin with them.
And now a word from one of our sponsors. Every restaurant operator understands the chaos of a restaurant kitchen during the meal rush. Restaurant Technologies Total Oil Management Solutions is an end-to-end automated oil management system that delivers, filters, monitors, and recycles your cooking oil, taking the dirtiest jobs out of your kitchen and letting your employees focus on more important tasks. Control the kitchen chaos with Restaurant Technologies and make your kitchen safer. No upfront cost. To learn more, check out rti-inc.com or call 888-796-4997. Growing your business can mean big time logistical questions like how am I going to keep up with all these local deliveries? Let Uber Direct offer you a helping hand. With Uber Direct, you can take orders on your website, via app, or by phone. Then drivers who are part of the Uber Courier network will pick them up from your store and deliver them to your customers' doorsteps. Sounds simple, right? Delivery just got better with Uber Direct. Check out uberdirect.com to learn more. Again, you talk about Chili's and through their different leadership realms, some of them have been really successful and others have not. And I know the new CEO, I just watched a YouTube video on him and it was incredible to listen to him. I'm going to pivot a little bit, Danny, here to technology because I think, you talked about technology sprawl. We've talked about it a lot on the show that a lot of people reacted, especially in COVID, because third party delivery, online ordering, kiosks, and they've struggled for two reasons. One, it was not architected very well together. It was a lot of things that were kind of bolted on, number one. And number two, with those things that were bolted on, it created a bad guest experience and then you've got cost sprawl because everybody's costs have gone up, including the technology providers like ourselves. And so with that, you've got to figure out how to do more with less or, figure out how to deal with that. How do you see brands evaluating again just those different consumers? Because McDonald's with the app and the kiosks, Chick-fil-A, my wife goes there more often than she probably should with the kids, but she almost always orders on the app because it's a freaking fantastic
Yeah.
experience and she gets the right food in the right places. And then we've all had that bad experience where either the app didn't work or I was trying to order a breakfast burrito on my way to work the other day and it didn't, the Apple Pay thing didn't work. So I had to pull my credit card out, pull over to the side of the road. And, and again, I'm not picking on any brand names, but these things happen and are now causing me to be reluctant to go back to that brand. I was excited. I can jump on the app. I can go order my food, but then I can't use Apple Pay. And so talk to me about how you're thinking, how these brands, and we talked about Chili's putting tablets at the table, like, things in general, I think are they have the ability to make a huge difference, but they also have the ability to hurt you, your brand perception and everything else if not done right.
Yeah, I think you said it at the end. The most pressing example on the restaurant planet right now is Starbucks. I was in a panel room recently listening to a panel on loyalty and metrics, and everyone kept referencing Starbucks in terms of things that they are doing at their brands, or they saw this when they were a customer. And so I ended up asking the question is, you all keep shouting out Starbucks, and yet this is also the same thing that everyone is now saying is broken. So
Yep.
what went wrong there? Because clearly they were the emphasis and the trailblazer for so much of what the industry does. And yet now what has happened? Because obviously you're all copying them. That's not no one's wrong about copying in this industry. That's just what everybody does. And so for them, it's a very interesting case study and looking at what was your technology promise. To me, their promise at the beginning was giving you this VIP level experience of being a rewards member who can do the one thing we all wanted to do in the world, which was skip the line at Starbucks. And then it all went wrong because skipping the line at Starbucks meant actually you were waiting longer because we were going to skip the line and stand in. No one knew where to stand. We were all in this chaotic corner on the side of the restaurant. The orders weren't there on
Hmm.
time. And so that very elemental part of their technology just broke. And then the other part of it too, getting into the more deeper changes, is the redemption to what they were offering. That got a little cloudy. It took too long. I think the sight lines to saying, okay, this is what I get eventually, because you now had so many versions of that. You go skip the line
Yep.
anywhere. You can go skip it at Caribou. You could go skip it at Dutch Brothers, whatever you wanted to. Actually, they're not the best example since they just added this, but point being, there are a lot of different apps and mobile ordering and rewards programs versus the days when they really trailblazed that path. So you saw in real time what happened when the value proposition of that trade-off of the data stopped working.
Hmm. Well, and order accuracy is probably the other thing that Starbucks and everybody else has struggled
Right.
with is because you give them, a POS in their hand or in their pocket or on a kiosk, they can modify these things like crazy. When I'm standing in front of somebody, we have a two-way, we have a dialogue. It's like, "Hey, Danny, you want this and this and this. Hey, can I get clarity on exactly what you're looking for?"
Right.
Whereas when it's in an app and I got 40 tickets in front of me or 40 items on the screen, you don't have time to stop and ask. You just make it the way you think they want it. They walk out the door and they're on their way to work. They get on the highway and now they're
Yeah,
pissed because
yeah.
they got, regular milk instead of almond milk or
And same thing with what you saw on TikTok with Chipotle recently, where people who were ordering ahead or weren't feeling as though they opened that bag when they got home that there was as much food in there as if peer pressured the person on the line to while filming them. And that was probably an extreme thing. And they addressed it and said it was a very small amount of stores. And I believe them. I think that was just a social thing. But it does speak to a larger point where it's if you go and order and pick up off the shelf, which is an amazing experience. That was one of my favorite things to come out
Mhm.
of the pandemic. The fact I could do that pretty much everywhere now. But if you do get home and it's not what you thought it was, or it's disappointing in some sense, like how it was built or the amount of portion size, or again, they just got the order wrong, it is harder to make up for that. And delivery, of course, is a whole different topic.
We could spend a whole nother topic on
Yeah,
delivery,
but
right?
it's a similar thing that's scary at times where it's a lot of that control gets handed over, and the restaurants, I think, agree at this point, there isn't a lot of choice there, but yeah, if the price or the experience of the driver doesn't align, a lot of the consumers, they blame the restaurant rightfully or wrongfully. And I think the same is true with some of the new technologies, the order at the table, the kiosks. I'm a personal big fan of using a kiosk. I think restaurants have gotten a lot better at understanding. I just saw an article about this that people kept sending me, which is basically this idea that the kiosk did not show up to take the restaurant job, which
Yep.
within the industry, we've all known that for years because I have
Yep.
been, I tell this story once in a while. If you've ever been to a restaurant that uses a kiosk incorrectly, it is the worst thing on earth
Yes.
because
Uh-huh.
what ends up happening, and this is my anecdote of this at times, is that there was a place near my house that was very popular, like cult favorite type of thing. Like it would be on Yelp and people would say, you got to wait in line. That's the only negative. But it was not a negative to a degree from a branding standpoint because you'd be walking by and you'd see, oh man, there's 30 people in line at this spot. One day I go in there, there's no line, and they've got a kiosk down one lane, and then you could order at the cashier at the other. Say, okay, cool technology. What they didn't do though was actually allocate that labor anywhere. They just threw a kiosk in there. So what ended up happening is that you went from waiting in line out the door to waiting for them to give you your order. It flipped upside down. So it
Hmm.
went from, okay, I got to wait 30 minutes to get my order taken, but then they give it to me in 2 minutes. Now you're standing there by the drink machine waiting for them to yell your name, and it's awkward. It didn't work. It was uncomfortable, and they streamlined the menu because it was harder, obviously, to adjust on the fly in their case. But it didn't work because they didn't actually take that person and add them into the back. So restaurants that do this
Yep.
correctly now, it did not save labor. It just moved the
Yes.
labor. And it's a good
Yep.
thing because it allows you to take more volume and to fulfill more orders, which is much better than just having a cashier work overtime, plus the fact that that's not really anybody's favorite job. And so now you
Hmm.
see those people who kind of roam and help with the kiosks. And so I think that's the story of technology in a nutshell is, okay, you have all these tools, but are they going to make you better or are you,
Yeah, are they gonna make the staff's
yeah,
experience better? And I don't know if it was the same article. I got the privilege to listen to the CTO of
yeah,
Yum talk about putting in kiosks at a recent conference, and he was talking exactly about that. Is we're not, the technology is not there to replace these people. They don't wanna do that
right.
job anyway. So find something else for them to do within the store to keep your labor numbers right, and the guests will get retrained to get what they're looking for, and
Yep.
it was
Yeah.
huge from that
Yeah, and
perspective.
I think that yeah, I forget I know what you're talking about, I forget his name, Joe, right? Yeah.
Joe
Yeah,
Par
that's
yeah.
exactly how I think it's happening now, is because the
Yep.
job itself, you if you're gonna pay all this money by hour that the industry is being forced to pay, regardless of what market you're in, it's going up, then you might as well
Mhm.
have that person doing something very useful. So
Yeah, have them doing something that's gonna deliver a higher value to your guests and to
right.
them really and give them life skills rather than sitting there and touching stuff on the
Correct. So I
POS.
think that's how you should look at technology is how does it help you get to that point? So much of that AI and stuff that we hear about, it's really happening on a very unsexy level. It's like labor
Yes.
scheduling and things that are taking tasks off a manager's plate so that they can go actually manage things like that. And that's what's turning the interior of a labor model into a place that people are more likely to actually want to come work, improve the QSR labor experience versus trying to say, I'm just going to get rid of people.
Yeah. No, I love that. I'm gonna take a quick left turn, Danny, as we're starting to wrap up, and we continue to see in our business a convergence with traditional restaurants, whether that be QSR or casual dining, and C stores and grocery stores. I know you're kind of new to the C store space, from a writing perspective, but I'd love your opinion. I know you live in Carolina. I stopped at a sheet specifically to experience made to order. I I grew up going to New Jersey, so Wawa has always been in my repertoire when I was in Jersey. So I'm familiar with some of the pioneers of that. But we're continuing to see restaurants showing up inside of grocery stores, whether that be ethnic grocery stores, independent grocery stores, or even some of the biggest chains in the country where they're making food prepared to order, and definitely C stores with the advent of electric cars. Again, at Sheets, there was a half a dozen cars, plugged in behind the store, and people were in ordering a sandwich or ordering, food. How do you think that's going to impact both this already trend that we talked about earlier in the show of bankruptcies and the struggle for restaurants? Because now the amount of wallet share is going to get split again another way.
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. I don't know too much about that sector at this point, but I will say in the years that I've been doing this, I've written multiple R C-store stealing share from QSR articles. So this is not a new topic. I think that the
Yep.
place that the C-stores have always struggled to compete is the drive-through. There are some C-store builds that have that up there, but by and large, that's where they get washed over in terms of convenience. Now, the grocery store and the made to order thing is really interesting. I saw something on that recently as well. Some of that is fresher or more affordable. Walking in a Wawa. From my perspective is I think what I learned about C-store industry in the last week and a half that I was unaware of was how many independents were in this industry. I, you know,
Yes. They all have the same brand name outside, but they're owned by, one guy owns 3 and one guy
Yeah,
owns 2
I did
and
not really know that. I didn't really think about it, and so for me, it's just like the Buc-ee's experience or some of these really cool spots. For every one of those, there's also the one I don't wanna go into. And
yeah.
and that's where they
Yep.
lose to the QSR because yeah, if I don't get out of my car and I can get my food, and so there's an element there, I think, of how much share can they take in the made to order. Even restaurants, this was a big thing during the COVID time of they were doing things like that. Some full service brands were becoming butcher shops and having these
Mhm.
unique setups. But once it settled back out, it was as though customers just fell into the occasions that they wanted to. And this goes back to our very first experience or conversation point here around experience of made to order food is great for a very specific thing. It's
No.
not gonna compete with Texas Roadhouse, and it's not gonna compete with Shake Shack in terms of if you are deciding you're gonna go make that kind of indulgent lunchtime visits. So to my take from a purely and we'll see what happens, but from a purely writer's perspective, I always write that story, and the answer is always no.
But then
So
you
we'll
think about
see.
Hunt Brothers sells as much pizza as Papa John's, do
Yeah,
they not?
exactly. They
You know?
do, and they always mention that. But to me, it's almost a different pizza occasion. It's like your
Yeah,
spontaneous,
or Casey's. Casey's General Store says they're what, number 3, I think, in pizza
right,
demand
right.
in the country, which is crazy to me, but also, I mean, but to your point, I don't think people experience it the same way that they might even when they're doing takeout, or they're doing delivery of Pizza Hut or Domino's or Papa
Yeah,
John's.
and that's where these loyalty programs and these other things become so vital. When you become a parody brand, then you're just another pizza delivery option for someone typing in pizza delivery. That's a hard customer to stick because that customer is going to
Mhm.
be a coupon chasing. Pizza in particular is a really interesting sector because it's like an e-commerce site. It's not,
Yes.
there's no menu boards. So they change the
Yeah.
price, they change the deals. You're browsing what's available based on your phone or your computer. And so they live in a whole different world than most of QSR. But again, like once they lose like that loyal core user, it's very tough to like, get that incremental constant pizza coupon person.
Yeah. Well, and discounts
Yeah.
always end up I mean, oftentimes kill brand find
And
their
they're
way
all
out of it,
gonna
right?
play that game too. It's just that they have to be able to hold the people that they do get who are actually frequent. That's where the battle right now
Yeah.
is being fought. And on that level, I don't think that they worry too much about the different channels of the sector. It's just, yeah, if you do start to see share of stomach, so to speak, to a supermarket based on something other than price, it's tough.
Well, and again, we work in the grocerant space or what we call grocerant space a little bit, and we continue to see deli ordering on a kiosk,
Yeah.
with some of the same traditional things. They're trying to get into the DoorDash game. They're trying to get into the Grubhub, Uber Eats game as well, which is, again, I think it's interesting. It'll be interesting over the next few years to see how that pans out. Well, Danny, how can people follow you? How can people stay connected? Because again, I think I would say I read almost everything you post because I love your style and I love what you continue. Because there's a lot of times that I read an article and I'm like, oh, I hadn't even thought about it that way, and I've lived in this space for my entire adult life. So how can people learn more about what you do, get connected, and such?
First of all, I appreciate that. So yeah, the best way to follow us or me personally Two places, our website, of course, qsrmagazine.com. We also have fsrmagazine.com if you're looking for full service news. And then just social media wise on LinkedIn, I'm not on any other platform really. I do have a Twitter account, but I haven't tweeted in 5 years for a lot of reasons. So yeah, just connect with me on LinkedIn. Very active there.
Yeah, I would say you're a great follow on LinkedIn because while I subscribe to the newsletters, there's a
Yeah,
lot of
that
times
too.
that I miss the articles. I mean, I get the emails every day, but then I'm like, oh crap. And then you'll post something like, oh, there's a bunch of comments on this. I need to go make sure I read this because it oftentimes is gold from
Yes,
that perspective.
e-letters too. Can't not shout those out. They're both free if you sign up for them on our website. Our magazine is also free if you still like the print edition. You just have to be a qualified operator. But anybody could get the emails. Send those 9 times a week. Personally, I'm sending them. So
Yeah, you should figure out some
yeah,
automation in that. There's probably there's probably a tool.
yeah, that would be
I'm teasing.
nice.
Well, Danny, thank you for jumping on so quickly. I mean, it was awesome. I know I reached out to you and you're like, yeah, let's get on. This is cool. So, our listeners love what you put out, and I personally do as well. So it was an honor to
I
have you on the
appreciate
show.
it.
To our listeners, guys, I know you guys got lots of choices, so thank you guys for spending time with us, and make it a great day.